Join us as the Barnegat Bay Partnership presents Life on the Barnegat Bay. Hi, I'm Stan Hales, Director of the Barnegat Bay Partnership. The foundation for the partnership goes back more than 20 years when a group of concerned citizens approached the state legislature about declining conditions in the Barnegat Bay. The state committed funds, a series of reports were published and completed in the early 1990s, and the state petitioned the federal government for assistance, which led to the establishment of the Barnegat Bay National Estuary Program in 2002 upon the completion of its comprehensive conservation and management plan. Since that time, the National Estuary Program has been working with federal and state agencies, local groups and others, schools, academic institutions, to protect and educate everyone about the problems in the Bay. In 2009, to better reflect the work that we do with our partners, we changed our name to the Barnegat Bay Partnership. In a few minutes, you'll be meeting with Pete McLean to hear more about the work we do with our partners to protect and restore the Bay.
You can rest assured Barnegat Bay will never be like it was many, many years ago. But it can be made better than it is today. Well, good day. I'm Pete McLean. I'm a wildlife biologist. I graduated from Cornell University and I taught up there a short length of time. I came to New Jersey when I was a young boy and moved into Ocean County in 1950 after I graduated from college. And I worked for the Division of Fish, Game, and Wildlife from a laborer on up to be retired deputy director. It was a wonderful life when I retired 6 or 7 years ago, and I really didn't want to retire, and I've kept right on working on Barnegat Bay because I've enjoyed it so much. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Barnegat Bay, what happened to it, why it happened, and what we want to think about not having happened in the future. So we'll start right out. In 1922, the Army engineers started digging a canal from the head of Barnegat Bay at Bay Head across the isthmus there to the entrance to would be the entrance to the canal on the Manasquan River. The idea was then you could take boats from the northern part of the bay, could sail through that canal and get out in the ocean rather than having to come all the way down 20 or 30 miles and go out this way. But it had a very deleterious effect on Barnegat Bay. Now, I'd have to say that I feel probably the worst disgrace we have is the fact that we've lost the entire section here of Barnegat Bay from Bay Head right on down to the mouth of Toms River and back up. This is essentially now, unfortunately, it's sort of an empty sea. Before, it was full of freshwater grasses, ducks, perhaps one of the greatest duck hunting areas in the world, and it was an area where people could go and fish for freshwater fish. They could get herring, and it was just a wonderful place to be. But we, in 1 2-year period, totally destroyed the biological section of Barnegat Bay that should have been saved. Of course, hindsight is always better than foresight, and I'm sure at that time nobody ever gave it a thought. However, that's the way it is today. But I'd also like to take a second and show you the 3 sections of Barnegat Bay that we can really work on with some idea of success. It would start right here at Toms River and go right on down to Manahawkin. That is an area that's pretty much similar all the way down, and it's one of the most polluted areas of all of Barnegat Bay. Now, why is it polluted? It's been hit from about every angle you could hit. A chemical company came in up here in Toms River, produced a lot of very toxic chemicals, and they came right down the river into the bay, and killed every fish in Toms River, and fish all over the bay. The pollution from that company was just totally out of control, and they were forced to put a 6-mile pipeline from the plant way up here all the way offshore, and they dumped it, of course, right in the Atlantic Ocean, where it didn't do anything to improve the ocean. So that's one problem they had. The next problem, the electric company came in down here, and they used fresh water from the streams and in their cooling process. And many hundreds of thousands of gallons of hot, warm water came out into the bay and made a lasting effect on the vegetation and the animals in the bay here. They just couldn't live in water of that temperature. By the same token, during the winter, that warm water attracted turtles and other wildlife to the plant. They went up the plant, and of course they got up as far as they could go, and they died. So they hit us in both ways. I think we could look into that situation very easily. I don't think we've done anything about that yet. But what happened to the rest of the bay is unpleasant to talk about, but it happens. In 1950, the Garden State Parkway came through, and all the young people that had been in the war, the soldiers, they started moving down into the bay, and all these tidal marshes along the bay, and this is extremely important to know, were the nursery grounds for the fish and other wildlife that are in the bay. Waterfowl fed and depended on those tidal marshes for their main food when the bay was frozen in the winter. Thousands of ducks died because they simply could not get to any food. And in Barnegat Bay, it suffered a very interesting thing. In the early 30s, this was solid eelgrass all the way up here and back. It started to die off. Nobody knew why. It continued to die off while I watched it, and by, I guess about 1970, it had disappeared, not only here, but off the coast. It was caused by a slime mold. So it was gone for 15 or 20 years, and it was a great loss because the eelgrass is so important in Barnegat Bay. There's also woodland grass in Barnegat Bay, which is not as plentiful, but the eelgrass was the backbone of the bay. Following that, we moved down the bay to the third section of Barnegat Bay, which goes from Manahawkin all the way down to Great Egg Harbor and Great Bay Boulevard down here and up here. On both the east and the west side of the bay, except for Island Beach, nothing is really left of the natural bay. Houses, marinas, have pretty much taken over this whole area, and we've lost the production of any tidal marshes that were in this area. There again, we've destroyed habitat. And one thing we have to learn, you've got to have the habitat to have the people, you've got to have the habitat to keep wildlife. And you've got to maintain that habitat. If you lose the habitat, you lose your productivity of the bay. So that area there and this area here was terribly overbuilt as a result of the Garden State Parkway bringing the people down in the 50s. And they wanted to live along the shore. The tidal marsh was sold off almost for nothing. And the developers came in and dug canals, and they built houses, very small houses, with no cesspools or septic tanks all along here, and all their waste went right out into the bay. So the lower part of the bay is a little better. Thanks to the Fish and Wildlife Service, a large amount of marsh has been acquired here, which is preserving that habitat for the wildlife in that area. So a lot of it has been lost, but there is a better functioning program here than we have in the upper part of the bay. Another interesting thing about this bay is that it's a major concentration area for waterfowl at this time of the year, and there is a considerable amount of life left in this water out here. However, we have to remember it is still polluted because we have the sewers and the waste all coming into this from the mainland. Great Bay Boulevard is owned by the Division of Fish and Game down there. That's the terminal part of Barnegat Bay, and that is producing a tremendous marsh there. And waterfowl by the thousands use this because it's one of the big marshes left on Barnegat Bay. In fact, it's the only big marsh left. There is a nice marsh up here, Clam Island, but it's small compared to this 12,000 acres down here. So therefore, you've got to realize the most important thing is protecting the habitat. You're protecting the habitat not only for wildlife, but you're protecting the habitat for people. What's good for the wildlife is good for the people. And when the bay gets so bad that you really don't want to smell it like it used to be up here, it was not a pleasant place to be. But still, Barnegat Bay is a lovely bay of water. We're lucky to have it. It's 40 miles long and 2.5, 3, sometimes 4 miles wide, mostly 3. So there are a lot of things wrong with Barnegat Bay, but there are a lot of things good about Barnegat Bay. First of all, it's still here. We have an opportunity to work on it. It's probably one of the largest marine areas along the New Jersey coast. I think it behooves us to do everything we can to encourage the citizens in this state to say, look, we've had enough of this. Let's put some real money into this and get that Barnegat Bay straightened out. It can be done, but it's not going to be cheap and it's not going to be easy. And see if we can't get a program going in Barnegat Bay that will offset a lot of the pollutions and problems that we've developed here. That we can hope we get and we can hope for. And that's something we better work for if we expect to have Barnegat Bay in another 25 years. If somebody would ask me, what can we do about Barnegat Bay? I'll say we have to get serious about Barnegat Bay, and we have to work with organizations like Save Barnegat Bay and Barnegat Bay Estuary Program, because they're trying to save Barnegat Bay, but they cannot do it alone. They've got to have the support of the public. The politicals are not going to step back and say, well, let's do something. The public got to say, you are going to have to do it. We want to save this bay. We need more money to go out into that bay to find out what's wrong and how we can replace some of the damage that we've already done.
Don't go away. When we come back, you'll meet some of our partners and learn more about their work to protect and restore the bay.
If somebody asked me what my most lovable part of Barnegat Bay is, I'd have to say the Sedge Island chain just north of Barnegat Inlet. I've been there since I was 20 years old. I have a cabin down there still, one of the last. There used to be 15 of us. There are 2 of us left, 3 of us left. And it's just a wonderful place to be. And when Johnny Hensler, who owned it, who was my next door neighbor, wanted to get rid of it, I said, why don't we buy that? Let's have the Division of Fish and Game or the state buy the Sedge House. And so the Division of Fish and Game took it over and made a marine training center for children. And every year, thousands of young people and a few old ones come down, and they spend 2 or 3 days sometimes there with the people. They learn how to kayak, they learn how to fish, they learn how to swim, and while they're doing this, they're enjoying the bay. They're realizing they have a product here that you can't replace any other way. And I think that's what the youngsters really can't believe, that there's something like this that they could do and enjoy, and it's not going to cost them hardly any money at all.
The Sedge Island Natural Resource Education Center is run by the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife. The major purpose of the center is really to educate people about the watershed, and we're really invested in doing that. We work with wildlife, of course, but the habitat is the main thing that we're really trying to get the message across and teach people about the habitat. So to that end, we take people out to an island. We spend 3 days most of the time. These can be kids, they can be adults, a whole variety of different people. And when they get to the island, then they go through a whole series of things. I try to make them think that it's on an island and it's totally laid back and relaxed and it's an atmosphere that nothing much has to happen any particular time, but I really do have an agenda. I tell them, okay, I'm looking at my watch. Are you hungry? It's time to eat. Are you tired? It's time to go to bed. Oh look, the tide's going out. Maybe we should go clamming. Tide's coming in and the fish are jumping out there, we better go fishing. So it looks really informal, but I have an agenda, and that agenda is to help people understand as much as possible about this whole salt marsh ecology. So to that end, they've already started by the time they got on the boat, because they're going out and they're learning about some of the birds. They're seeing the Sedge Island Marine Conservation Zone, which is 1,900 acres of open space, jointly administered by New Jersey Division of Parks and Forestry and Fish and Wildlife. And it's a really unique area. And so they learn about that literally before they even get to the island.
So what we're going to do is we're going to finish up some of the testing we're going to do. And again, we got our initial test. You should all have the paperwork. Please make sure you record the units of measurement on your paperwork. You're going to hand this in tomorrow.
One of the things that we do a lot is measure water quality, because it's so important. So we look at that water quality, and we do that by chemically testing it, and we do that by using measures to test dissolved oxygen, salinity, things like that.
We were testing the water back in our hometown, Nutley. We tested the local streams for the dissolved oxygen levels to see what kind of organisms could survive, and the biotic potential, talking about that. And we did the same thing here, testing the dissolved oxygen in with salinity, and because it's a freshwater stream by our house, so now we have an idea of like what kind of organisms can live in water with salt and ocean life and different things like that.
All kinds of things. Everything, because oxygen's a very, very important quality. So you measured the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. What kind of readings did you get? High, low, intermediate, what does it matter? I mean, you can give me a number, but it won't mean anything. The number won't mean anything unless you can describe how that relates to something else. But we also do bioindicators. We look at the life that's in it. We look at the fish that are there, the invertebrates, the vertebrates, and we see those animals, and we make generalizations as to how the water has been, not just for that instant that the chemical test is going on, but for the longer period of time. Because if those fish, those other animals have lived there, then we know that they can exist in that environment, and they have for some time. Pull, 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 pull. Okay, stop. Good, get our buckets of water. Everybody over here. Okay, we got everything we could possibly find?
Looks like it.
I doubt it, because nobody got down and crawled around on their hands and knees, but let's throw it back in anyway. Okay, let's take it back to the lab. Railing to dry it out. We get the most drip. Oh, sure you can. We kayak a lot because we're on an island, and the kayaks are a great vehicle to get out and get into the marsh. So they're really paddling around through some of the natural channels, through some of the mosquito ditches, and they're seeing osprey and a peregrine falcon and all the different kinds of bird life that's there. And then we stop a little bit and we get out and we walk on the salt marsh, and we see that it's not some horrible swamp that they're going to sink up to their knees in mud, but it's in fact a pretty solid kind of a material. And they start to learn about the difference between Phragmites, an invasive species of plant, and Spartina, the natural marsh grass. They learn that sedge islands are a salt marsh which is probably the top, definitely one of the top 3 in terms of biomass in the world. There's a rainforest, there's a coral reef, and there's a salt marsh. And we don't have the first 2, so we have the salt marsh. So it's a wonderful, wonderful environment to learn about. And they start learning about how this nursery effect, because of this salt marsh, it holds all sorts of plants, and those plants break down. They form detritus, which is a living mud kind of material, and that's the basis of life in the marsh. From that, all the invertebrates begin to grow, and from there those are fed on by smaller fish and so on right up the food chain. And these things are living lessons. They're not just things that there's classroom and they're looking at in a textbook. They're feeling the mud, they're seeing the little critters, and they're actually seining them up, and then they really start getting into it. But this is what we call a macrobiotic index. I'm on them a lot because I really, really want them to get it, and I want them to get it, but I think I'm on them in a way that's kind enough, and I joke with them enough so that they know that it's fun. I'm all about having a good time. In fact, the motto of Sedge Island from the Henslers, the family that owned the house when it was a duck hunting lodge back in the 20s and 30s and even beyond that, the motto was relax and have fun. And that's what it's all about for me. My education, and I've been teaching for a lot of years, has always been if you're enjoying what you're doing, if you're having a good time, you're more likely to remember it. So I'm really trying to do that. So they're playing, but they're playing with my toys. It's called a crab net or a clam rake or some other kind of implement that they're catching their food. The group that we just had was from Nutley High School. These are AP biology kids, some of the brightest kids we'll ever have.
Some of the highlights were really the kayaking, and I greatly enjoyed the clamming. I've never clammed before, and it was interesting how you could feel them with your feet and just pick them up and then cook them.
Bioluminescence was really great. The little organisms that refract light and give off their own light when you move your hand in the water.
At the end, when they're coming back from the island, I asked them what they remember about the experience. What was the best part of their experience? Some of them say it was the kayaking. Some would say it was the first time I ever ate a clam. Some say it was bioluminescence, it was the magic. Some of the kids that slept out on the boat with me last night said it was seeing the stars. So everybody gets something else out of that experience, but the idea is that everybody goes home thinking that salt marshes aren't some horrible smelly place that you bury bodies in or you dump garbage in, but a real important environment that is something that we should cherish, in fact something we should encourage. So the education starts from the time they step off the bus or get out of their cars, and it doesn't finish until they're back on the bus or back in their cars. And that's really how it works.
Paula, thanks for coming to the Barnegat Bay Festival. How many years have you been coming?
This is my third time that I've been here, and I love it every year. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Well, hey, I see you've been selling these great t-shirts. What's so special about this lighthouse on the back?
Well, it's special because this is the view from our dock. Experience Barnegat Bay is one of the programs of the Lighthouse Center for Natural Resource Education. And it's important because we believe in experiential learning. We have visitors from children, members, college students, and seniors that come out and really experience Barnegat Bay through our learning programs and being on the facilities.
It is really a wonderful facility. It's got a beautiful view, and there's some nice woods all around the site.
It's 194 acres that has been preserved on Barnegat Bay, so it's very important. It's the location of the former Lighthouse Vacation Center for the Blind. And now that it's been preserved, and it's just so important because it's at the headwaters and it's right next to the bay, so that we're able to tie that all together and show people how important it is to preserve the Barnegat Bay.
Thank you for joining us with this edition of Life on the Barnegat Bay. If you'd like to learn more about the Barnegat Bay Partnership and our members, please visit our website, bbp.ocean.edu. And here's Pete for a few final thoughts on his life's work, the Barnegat Bay.
I'm 84 years old now. I'm not going to be around much longer. When I come down to the bay, frequently I'll sit and look at it and say, why did we let this happen? We didn't let it happen, it just happened. And why haven't we done something about it? We just can't muster the forces to do something about it. We've tried, but I think we can do better. And I think the harder we work, the better off we are. I've made Barnegat Bay my life. I have a cabin down there still. I don't get there much, but my sons and daughters are using it. And it's wonderful to get out there and just enjoy the evening sun sets, the morning sun rises. How many times do you see that? So I think it's really important that we make Barnegat Bay available to more people in an educational way, so they don't go there and say, well, I went down, but I didn't learn much. At Island Beach, we have an interpreter program where we take young people out, go seining. Most of them have never touched a crab before. They don't know how to touch a crab, but they learn. They've never caught fish in the net before. They didn't know what they were catching, but they learned what they are. And the kids, believe it or not, children, they're kids. We're talking about people up to 21, they're still kids to me. They're learning something and they love it. And I think if we can keep programs like that going, then we can stimulate the public to say, let's keep this going. We've got to save Barnegat Bay.